Good afternoon and welcome back to the 2021 CUNY Accessibility Conference. My name is Heather Zeman and I'll be your moderator for the next hour. This afternoon's session is called The Next Normal: Reflections, Insights, and Preparation for the Year Ahead. Before we get started, we have just a couple quick housekeeping notes to relay. First, captions are available. You can find that link at the bottom of your screen. If you would like to utilize our ASL interpreters, you may find them listed in the Participants tab, and you can pin them to your screen. Right now, your microphones are muted, but I encourage you to ask questions throughout during the session via the chat. We will also have a dedicated Q&A period during the last 10 minutes of our session, beginning at just about 2:40 p.m. If you do require video to sign your question or microphone access to voice your question, please make your request in the chat so that we can go ahead and update your Zoom settings accordingly. To share relevant resources or links, please enter that information into the chat so that I can share that with attendees. And lastly, if you experience any technical issues, please let us know in the chat so that our tech support team can do their best to assist you. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Kimberly Doan, the Associate Director of the Student Accessibility and Academic Resource Center at Tufts University. Kimberly?
Perfect. Thank you so much, Heather. All right, let me just get my Zoom all set here. All right, so as Heather mentioned, my name is Kimberly Doan. I use she, series pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of the STAR Center at Tufts University. So I'd like to thank our conference host today, as well as Heather, who's moderating our session. I'll be holding time at the end of the session, about 10 minutes for Q&A, but also please feel free to add questions to the chat as well. We'll be also talking about combining our resources, sharing relevant materials, so please feel free to contribute those as well. I would love to compile them at the end, and I can share those with folks who are interested as well. All right, to provide a quick overview of the agenda today, first we're going to start out with a quick introduction. I'll share a little bit about my institution, and then I'll be breaking the presentation into 3 sections. So first, we'll be reflecting on the past year. I know we've done a lot of that throughout the conference. It's been really interesting to hear some of the different perspectives and some of the common experiences we've had throughout the past year. And then we're going to talk a little bit about insights, collaborative efforts, and then finally about planning for the fall semester and the upcoming year. So my goal for our time together is to share information on my institution, as well as discuss the experiences, challenges, the wins we've had as disability services professionals. So I'll be sharing my experience specific to my institution, but I'd also love to hear folks who are in the community college setting and the public setting, how we can pool these resources and think a little bit about how we can prepare for the upcoming year. Okay. All right, so before we begin, I'd like to provide a land acknowledgement as an expression of gratitude and appreciation for the land we're currently on. We acknowledge that the land we live, learn, and thrive on are the traditional, ancestral, and unceded homelands of Indigenous and tribal nations. Our home and institution here in Medford, Mass. Are on the original homelands of the Massachusetts tribal nation. So we acknowledge the genocide and systems of oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous people of their land, and we honor and respect the diverse and beautiful people still connected to the land today. So to provide a little bit of context to the presentation, I wanted to share a little bit of information about my role at Tufts and about the university. There's an image on screen of an aerial shot of our campus during the fall. We have some residential buildings, some academic buildings, and this is on our Medford campus. So Tufts is a medium-sized private institution in Medford. We're right outside of Boston, and we also have campuses in Boston, the School of the Museum of Fine Arts, and in Grafton. So on our campus and the SMFA campus downtown, we provide support to about 6,000 undergraduate students, as well as some of our graduate programs. Our medical, dental, and veterinary schools have their own accessibility supports. Our office is comprised of our associate dean, myself. We have 2 professionals that are exclusive to accessibility services, and then 4 professionals who have dual roles in our accessibility side of the house, as well as our academic resource area. So we also recently navigated a department merge where we combined our academic resources and our accessibility services. So that happened summer of 2020. So we had a very busy summer as we were navigating the early stages of the pandemic. So to transition to our first section, first I want to reflect on my experience at Tufts and talk a little bit about how we navigated these early stages. This will be a nice kind of follow-up to our colleagues at Landmark who provided some really valuable data. The information I'm going to cover today definitely reflects what they shared. It's really similar to the experiences it sounds like many of you had. So it's important to note, again, this is specific to my experience, but I'd love for us to share a little bit more about our own experiences later on in the presentation. So throughout the past year, there have been multiple areas at the institution where we've seen a significant impact from the pandemic. So on the screen, there is the first row of a table, which organizes these areas of impact. So I wanted to highlight some of the areas where we've seen some of the largest impact and a greater level of need. It's also important to note that in each of these areas, our Black, Indigenous, and communities of color were not only navigating the COVID-19 pandemic, but also the impact of daily injustices and systemic racism. So the first area that I wanted to highlight is where we saw impact around our administrative processes and procedures. It sounds like a lot of folks are echoing this sentiment of shifting our processes and systems online very quickly, navigating everything to electronic, making sure each of us had our own remote office in our homes, which was really challenging to do in a very short period of time. We saw an immediate increase in accommodation requests. Some of these were connected to accessibility and disability, and others were not related to disability, but were connected to health and COVID needs. So some of these, for example, we had students who were requesting specific COVID testing. We had requests around off-campus housing to avoid exposure, but maybe it wasn't a student with a diagnosed disability who was registered with us. We also had students who were navigating a lot of anxiety around travel. Our international students especially were navigating a lot as they were considering how to get home and do so safely. So similar to many institutions, our budget was also impacted, as well as having adjustments to our academic policies. I know someone had mentioned this today. We also implemented an exceptional pass-fail option where students could take their course exceptional pass-fail. It would still count towards their major requirements or their distribution requirements, but it would not impact their GPA. And that's still currently active as of this semester. Next, I'll review the second row. So highlighting the area of our disability services team. So we immediately, as mentioned, had to focus on transitioning to this remote work. Much of our work is an open door policy. We have drop-in hours with students. Students walk in all the time. And we also have impromptu meetings with our staff. So we're constantly connecting throughout the day. So this really changed our working culture for our team. And especially while we navigated a merge at the same time, thinking about how we worked together, how we collaborated, how we communicated, we really needed to revisit that. In addition to our work-related responsibilities, there were obviously also stressors outside of the work environment. So we also needed to support our teams as they navigated these outside responsibilities under really stressful conditions. So this really required us to rethink how we navigate management and leadership in a remote environment during a really challenging time. And that included staffing changes, onboarding in a remote space. These were things that we had not navigated before. In the third row, we have one of our largest areas that we've definitely been covering throughout the conference, and that's student support. So as we were all navigating this shift to a remote setting, our students were as well. So in addition to packing up their dorm rooms, connecting with professors, making travel plans, connecting with their families, they were also navigating how am I going to use my accommodations, ensure that access needs are met in this learning environment that many of them had not learned in the environment before. Tufts doesn't have too many online courses, so this was definitely a big shift to the typical learning environment. It also quickly changed how students were connecting with our staff. So we have many students, whether it's for a drop-in meeting or for regular check-ins for academic strategy work or accommodation implementation. These students also needed to kind of rethink how they were working with our office. Another area is our student staff. So we have note takers, we have undergraduate and graduate office assistants, we have students who support our accessible document conversion. So this was also a shift. How can we support these students? I think for all of them, it was their first time as they navigated remote work as well. How do we provide that management with students who are all over the country as well? It was a relatively small team, but it was a new process for us. And then finally, we saw a significant increase in need for some students. So this transition was, pretty challenging for some of our students. But then we also had students that in this remote environment, they found it to be more accessible and they really preferred this learning environment. I remember the second week, I already had a student who said, I hope we never go back. This is so great. I love that I can learn from, a space that I'm designing. So we really saw a range of that. And in the final row, our impact on instructors and campus partners. So instructors were very quickly converting their in-person courses to a remote learning format, learning new technologies and adjusting their course modalities. So this included recording asynchronous lectures, redesigning course components, implementing universal design learning guidelines, and providing accommodations in this remote space. So on top of navigating all these pieces, we also had a request for other commitments on campus. So we were navigating working groups and committees that were connected to equally as important initiatives such as justice, equity, inclusion, diversity initiatives, as well as mental health working groups and serving on these committees. So our colleagues as well as our teams were really navigating a lot as well, as I'm sure many of you experienced. This list is not exhaustive, but just some of the areas where we've seen the largest impact. So next, to transition into our next section, we're going to talk a little bit about insights and a little bit about how we've used data and partnerships to get us to where we are today. So using data to inform our work, we collected data in a variety of ways, and this has really been our friend throughout our process. So it included data on our administrative processes, so looking at our Outlook email trends, our phone calls, our accommodation numbers. We saw some interesting trends like an increase in grievances and appeals this year. Thinking about our annual accessibility surveys, I'll talk about that in just a moment. Tracking our technology, like website visits, our social media impressions, who was using our Canvas site, as well as thinking about academic standing, tracking, and how we were running our virtual programming. Trends for support. So as I mentioned, in this annual survey, I run one each year. They're typically in the spring, and we do one for students and there's one for faculty. And this has been really beneficial for us. We saw a number of common trends where folks were interested in STAR-related resources or support. For students, they were really interested in having more clarity around our processes, around documentation, around what the registration process entails, as well as support on having accommodations in place. So how do I talk to my professor about this need, or I need some flexibility, maybe it isn't an accommodation, but I need some more support. How do I articulate that to my TA? Conversations such as that. So we also had suggestions around programs of interest and other STAR improvements, which has been really beneficial to us year to year. We've incorporated some of the initiatives we've worked on each year. So the year that we implemented our accessibility database, which we use Accommodate, we asked our students and faculty about that. And that was really beneficial to see where we could make some improvements to make it as user-friendly and accessible as possible. For instructors, we were interested in how they wanted to know how we could support self-advocacy. How can we make sure that students are providing their accommodation letters at the start of the semester, or reaching out if they need support, or connecting with our academic resources if possible. We also had a number of comments and feedback around exam proctoring. So at Tufts, our professors provide the extended time proctoring, and we provide distraction-reduced testing and exams with assistive technology. So they really want a proctoring center where everything is in one place. We would love that as well as something like a faculty liaison who only works with supporting faculty in their courses, as well as information on UDL. How are they designing their courses? So to share some preliminary data, this is currently in progress. It's going to be open for a little bit longer, but to give a couple highlights, we asked students, as a result of the pandemic, most classes transitioned to online/hybrid learning. How do you feel this shift has impacted accessibility in your courses? And I included a pie chart here where it shows that 42% said that they experienced increased accessibility. 32% said it was decreased accessibility, and 26% said that it remained the same. We also asked, if I could choose my preferred learning format, I would choose which of the following modalities. And we had 15% students said, I want to be fully remote in the future. We had 43% who were interested in hybrid. So there's a remote component, there's also an in-person component. And then 42% who were really excited to return back to the fully in-person learning environment. So this is also interesting. As the folks at Landmark covered, I think that we will see, how are we going to navigate this interest in this increased accessibility that the hybrid environment provides. A little bit about the faculty. So I had mentioned some of the topics that we covered with instructors, accommodate, instructor resources. We had asked, what's the best way to get you information? Is it posting it on our website? Is it email? Is it 1 to 2 minute short videos? It was overwhelmingly email was the response to that. But we also know instructors are getting a lot of emails. So we also asked, which of the following formats are you interested in teaching for fall 2021? We found 62% in the pie chart that I provided are interested in in-person. For hybrid learning, so some remote, some live component, 17%, 15% were interested in continuing remote but doing live courses, and 6% were interested in exploring remote asynchronous classes. So this will be helpful too as we consider the preparation for the resources we're providing and what courses might look like in the fall. So another trend we've seen throughout the past year is a change in the types of accommodation requests that we've been receiving. Just to note a few, in the area of academics, we've seen more accommodations around the virtual exam space, Canvas exams, how exams are formatted on a virtual platform. We also received requests around video camera use, having camera off, for example, being able to audio record the classes. And we already are having students who are inquiring about continuing in a hybrid or virtual space after we return to in-person. I've included a graphic design image on here where it's a Zoom window where there are 16 faces of people who are on the Zoom. In the area of housing, we've had requests around specific roommates. I know this person is adhering to COVID guidelines. I'd like to switch rooms and reside with them. Room changes, single rooms, the type of dorm. I would like to be in a suite so that I have less exposure to other people. So this housing area also, there are some unique requests and new requests that we're navigating. And some of this also too was around the potential opportunity for exposure or impact rather than their current functional limitations. And then finally, we also navigate dining and parking accommodations. And we saw some unique requests here too, where students were concerned about food allergies, access to food, wanted modifications to meal plans, as well as transportation, parking, requesting a lift or a driving service, for example, rather than taking the MBTA, which is our public transportation system. So throughout the past year, one of our greatest strengths is the partnerships that we've formed throughout the year. Identifying champions early on has allowed us to collaborate on resources and reach more students more broadly than if we were just spearheading an initiative. I think very quickly we realized there are a lot of students to meet. How are we going to meet more students and also meet them where they're at, where we're not able to put a table in the campus center, for example, or we're not able to have events where we can have students come in and we can say, oh, let me check in about this class. So how are we going to connect with more students? So to provide an example of a partnership, I've included a screenshot of our Department of Theater, Dance, and Performance Studies. So this is an image. There are 4 instructors, and they each have a video on their Vimeo site, which I included here, where they perform different scripts that were written by our STAR staff. So some of the topics included finding a virtual study buddy, requesting your accommodation letters, how to create a routine, and creating a work from home environment. So we kept these no more than 2 minutes, preferably 1 minute, as another way for students to get information. We knew that they were being bombarded with email that was very text heavy. So how else can we connect with students where they are? All right, so other partners that we connected with included our academic deans, our different departments, university chaplaincy, residential life, and our Office of Campus Life. So I think that this was a really interesting opportunity to form partnerships with some of the folks that we haven't had a chance to work with yet. And this was extremely beneficial because, again, we were able to reach more students, but we also were able to really strengthen the partnerships with some of the departments that I had mentioned we maybe hadn't worked with as closely before, as well as sharing information on STAR. So as we were connecting with folks, we could say, oh, we have this workshop happening, or, oh, did you know that STAR can provide this, or we have drop-in coffee hours happening. And this was a nice way for us to kind of organically share some of this information. Okay, so to wrap up this section, we collected data, we listened to and appreciated our student and community partner voices, and then we use this information to adjust and pivot. So, and this is ongoing. So, including some of the adjustments here. So some of this was around virtual programming. We very quickly realized 60 minutes is too long for a Zoom when students have been in class all day. They did not want to attend that. So how can we shorten that? Thinking about the best way we can connect with students, reach them, support our instructors. And this is something too, we're thinking about this as we prepare for the fall, but we also were collecting this along the way to adjust throughout the past semester. Okay, so to think about the final section here, as we transition to looking forward and all of our lessons learned, how are we going to plan for the upcoming fall and the upcoming academic year? So in order to share how we're kind of working through our current plan of action, I wanted to provide a visual of our current processes that can be used as a planning tool as you prepare for the year. So on the screen, there are 4 arrows pointing towards the right that indicate 4 different steps. So step 1 is identify needs and focus areas. Step 2 is prioritize your highest needs. Step 3 is identify collaboration and campus partners. And 4 is determining your action plan and the timeline that will be used to implement these steps. So we'll go through each one. Okay, so section 1, identifying needs and focus areas. So as I reviewed the data and firsthand accounts, I mentioned, we asked what's working, what needs improvement. So breaking down the different areas of support, these predominantly fell into one of the following categories. 1, for students and families. 2, how we can support our disability services provider teams. And 3, how we can support instructors and partners on campus. So we needed to consider where these needs were and how they're also connected to our larger institution and strategic planning initiatives. On the screen, there's a pyramid and there are 4 equal sections that indicate those groups. So step 2, focusing on thinking about the highest need priorities. So each semester, our team holds a staffed retreat. And at these retreats, we focus on our strategic planning, we share data, and we plan for the upcoming year. And this is a really great time for us to all come together. We usually end with something fun at the end, but it's a really great time for us to really kind of think critically about what are we doing that's working and what are we doing that needs some adjustments so that we can continue to move forward. So current needs that we're exploring for the upcoming fall include returning to work. So our current model, we have had a small number of our staff that are coming into the office, usually one or two were at reduced capacity in order for us to provide some accommodation implementation and have coverage in the office. But the majority of our staff is out of office. So thinking about how we can return, especially for some folks who haven't been in the office since last March when we transitioned, how can we support our team as they come back to campus and redesign what this new normal looks like? For students, we wanted to support the return to in-person instruction as well as reaching our students, clarifying those processes that it sounds like they were really interested in, and thinking about engagement and how we can reach them. And finally, supporting our instructors around their courses and making STAR resources more widely known. In our survey, there were some professors that said, oh, I've never worked with STAR, or I'd really like to know what STAR does. So that's another piece too, that it would be a really great focus area for us. So step number 3, determining your strongest partnerships for collaboration. So identifying partners, think about, who on the team can help you tackle your highest need areas. This also is tricky too with a smaller office. So our team is relatively well staffed at the current moment, but when I joined Tufts in 2012, there was one full-time staff and a part-time support person. So the office has really evolved, and I think those partnerships and collaboration efforts are really a crucial no matter the size of the office. Also thinking about, who have you worked with the least and who needs information on your department. I'll talk a little bit about our faculty advisory board, but this was one of the areas we were interested in too, and thinking about which department, do we have the least amount of contact with, and why is that the case? Let's get, folks in so we can work together a little bit closely. And also, don't forget about your disability services colleagues in the field. Opportunities like this conference, local, national partners, thinking about the institutions that are your benchmark institutions are really useful. I feel like I've had more informal conversations over the past year than in the past few years, where folks have reached out, or we've reached out and said, can we just connect? How are you navigating distraction reduced testing in the remote environment? Or how are note takers working? Are professors providing slides? Do we still need as many note takers? Is this access built in? How do we navigate this? So some of those informal conversations and learning how others are doing this are really beneficial as well. So the final step and last step is determining your action plan and your timeline for putting things in place. So to talk a little bit about the action plan for our disability services teams, one of our biggest areas, as I mentioned, is supporting the team in returning to campus. So according to Microsoft's most recent work trend index, weekly meeting time is up 148% since February 2020, and 73% of employees are interested in continuing flexible work options. So I recently completed an anonymous survey with our team to provide some opportunity for feedback, and our rate is even higher than the 73% for folks who really are interested in having a little bit more flexibility as we return. So it's really important that we think about, what does this look like, and what's feasible in student-facing roles and an office where we did have this open door policy. How does that look with a staff that's also work from home, and how does that look with scheduling? So is there more flexibility with schedules than we once thought? Do we need everyone here and everyone leaving at the exact same time? Or would some flexibility actually provide for more opportunity for students to connect with the folks that are in office? So thinking about those pieces is something that's currently in progress. Another initiative that we're exploring, I piloted a small scale program this year with a smaller group on our team, where we had a monthly discussion series, and we did this virtually. And it was different topics that were connected to our work. So this ranged from watching documentaries on Netflix, we listened to podcasts, we completed LinkedIn learning trainings together. The topics that were outlined were ones that were of interest to us. So we had the group kind of note what were some of the areas that we were interested in. And then we also had buy-in from those of us who were participating, and we could focus on topics that were really interesting and relevant to our work. And then finally, thinking about paying close attention to combating burnout, compassion fatigue. Teams are have an extraordinary amount of work, and I know we're already obviously discussing fall, and it feels like it's already ramping up. So how can we encourage folks to take the time they need so that we can take care of ourselves to be able to take care of each other and our students? One tip is reacquainting yourself with the institutional wellness programs. These definitely vary by institution, but there are also some other accessible resources out there. Leading through modeling, I think one thing that's been pretty tricky, I know personally, is encouraging folks to take time when we're busier than we've ever been. So how can we model that for our teams, and also set up a plan so that folks feel like they're able to take the time that's available to them. If people aren't supported in being able to take that time, it makes it really difficult to take it. So how can we support everyone so that they have a plan, and then also too, that plan is in place in the event of an unexpected absence. And having an intentional dialogue around this will also aid in transparency with staff and facilitate trust with the team. So next, focusing on an action plan for instructors and campus partners. Throughout the past year, our team has developed a number of resources to support instructors in the hybrid and virtual learning environment. So we post these directly to our website so that it's easily accessible. That link is provided, and I can send that in the chat as well. We've also included a syllabus statement on our website, which outlines referrals to our academic resources as well as our accessibility resources. And this also too has been helpful because we've had some instructors who said, I'm not really sure what this statement should look like. Could you provide some guidance? And now they can go to our website, copy and paste, so you can see our version of that as well. And I have to give a special shout out to Kirsten Beeling and Samantha Brummer on our team, who have developed most of these resources and worked really hard to have a comprehensive support, as well as partnering with our faculty education team. So some other initiatives, I previously mentioned the Faculty Advisory Board. So in the upcoming year, we're going to plan to expand our Faculty Advisory Board. I began this in 2014 with a small pilot group. And since that, we've grown. With the department merge, we are now supporting academic resources as well as the accessibility support. So we've expanded the departments that are represented, the number of instructors who are participating, and I use that survey to ask folks if they're interested. So are you interested in the Faculty Advisory Board? I tell a little bit about what it entails, and then they can enter their email if they're interested in getting more information. And after that first year, we really quickly had a good number of participants. We usually have about 10 to 15 so that we can still have some robust conversations. And we do 90-minute meetings once a semester. We had multiple meetings. The first couple of years we didn't. It was too difficult to have the same instructors continuing with the conversation and able to make all the meetings. So now we just have one longer one. If anyone's interested in chatting a little bit more about the faculty board, I'd be happy to connect. We also found that one of the most accessible ways to reach a large number of faculty is to meet them where they're at in their department meetings. So we'll reach out to instructors and say, can we join just for the first 10 or 15 minutes and share a little bit about what we have going on at STAR right now? And that is usually a great way for us to get FaceTime with the instructors, allow opportunities for Q&A, and also get some feedback on what they're experiencing in the classroom. We also have an annual Disability Advocate Award, and that is provided to an instructor or staff member based on community member nominations in recognition of our accessibility champions on campus. I get a cost-efficient award, which I deliver to their office, and then we post this to our website. We share with our students and academic departments, and it's a great way to highlight instructors who are leading the way with accessible course design. And the final focus, supporting students during the upcoming year. So as we know, our students have navigated an extraordinary amount of transition through the past year, from our graduating seniors to our incoming non-matriculated students. Each student's returning to campus with a unique experience as they've navigated the pandemic. And many students too, we've anecdotally had students who've kind of noted that social interaction has really changed. So students are going to be reacclimating to that classroom environment, group work, participation in class, which will be a transition for some students. So a couple of our top priorities, I had already noted, increasing transparency with more information. But I think also too, we need to rethink what this process looks like for conditions connected to COVID. So this includes long-term impact, students having varying access to resources over the past year who may not have been connected to care or have documentation, especially for our students that maybe they're not local and they relocated and then no longer have access to some of the supports that they did have. As well as collaborating with our medical partners on campus. So we have a great partnership with our health services team, and I think that that's a partnership too that will be important for us to continue as we get information on what this long-term COVID impact looks like for some of our students who have been diagnosed with it. It's also important to note that as we're reviewing barriers, functional impact, and the nature of the course structure and requirements, that we consider access versus preference. So we've already had some students that have expressed that, maybe they prefer a certain format or a way that professors have taught, but it may not necessarily be an accessibility barrier. It may not be connected to their disability. So thinking about working really closely with instructors to learn whether or not an accommodation would fundamentally alter the course will be important. So, and that's also something I think that is important for us to think about, that additional time that will go into that increase in individual accommodation or individual conversations. If a class was designed as an in-person course and a student's requesting remote access, how does this look in terms of exploring how these learning objectives and the course was met throughout this current year? So this will be important. Another way we're aiming to provide comprehensive support to students through the fall semester is we're in the process of designing a transition class for the incoming class of 2025. So this will run this fall, and it will focus on supporting student transition, navigating the college environment in academic and residential spaces, promoting self-advocacy, resiliency, and although this class will not be specifically designed for students with disabilities, we imagine that this may be appealing to some students who may be familiar with our office, may be meeting with us over the summer, and are interested in having a supportive cohort as they transition to campus, especially at a time when orientation may look a little bit different than it has in past years. We're also continuing to think creatively about keeping students engaged and sharing information in multiple ways. We know our students have all these emails all the time. So many of our students are saying, I just totally missed that information. It's so text heavy. So one way that we have tried to meet students where they're at is also thinking about our social media. So our colleague, AJ Lyman, manages our social media accounts, and I've included an image here of our Instagram handle, which is @Star Center. Star has 2 A's. And on it, there are thumbnails. There are different events such as Disability Awareness Month, a virtual accessibility art show, planning accessible online events, as well as disabled artist highlights and events and partnerships or events that are going on with campus partners. So also we want to highlight what else is happening on campus too. So our followers have increased 223% since August 2020. And I also just saw a post this morning from HubSpot saying that from a marketing perspective, engagement on Instagram is 10 times higher than Facebook. And I can't quantify it, but I feel like we have had more traction with students on this platform versus Facebook. And again, we'll continue to plan programming to support students. So some of these include academic workshops. So we have ones that our academic resource team focuses on note-taking, reading strategies, presentation skills, test taking, time management. And one of our goals for this too is that our individual one-on-one student meetings, the need for that was not feasible with how many staff we have. So what can we provide in small group settings? Some of these have 2 to 4 students in them, so that students can work individually on their work, still have some individualized support, but we can meet the broader need from students. So as we conclude, I just want to wrap up with a quote from organizational psychologist Adam Grant's new book, Think Again. When we dedicate ourselves to a plan and it isn't going as hoped, our first instinct isn't usually to rethink it. Instead, we tend to double down and sink more resources into the plan. This pattern is called escalation of commitment. So my goal as we're approaching the fall semester is to steer clear of escalation of commitment and remain flexible and agile, continue thinking creatively about resources and collaboration, and continue to adjust as needed as we prepare for the unpredictable. So finally, I want to leave a couple minutes for us. I know we've had some questions coming into the chat, so I'm happy to provide these. Here is a list of resources around return to work, some really great universal design resources, as well as thinking about supporting our teams.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Kimberly. I want to echo some of what I've seen come in the chat. This has been an incredibly valuable presentation, a lot to take in. And I do want to just relay a couple questions to you that have come in since the beginning. A lot of questions actually around the survey results that you relayed. So specifically, a lot of folks are interested in how you're getting people to respond, what percentage of the students and faculty are responding, and what tools are you using to encourage those rates, because you know how difficult it can be.
Yes, it definitely could be better. I will lead with that. Typically we have anywhere between, I'd say 100 to 150 responses for faculty and for students. We usually have a little bit higher of a faculty response. We have thousands of each, so there definitely is room for improvement. We typically offer a small incentive. We do like a $20 gift card raffle, where at the end I'll just enter if you'd like to be have your email included to be entered for the raffle, please include it, and then we'll give that away. When we've had the resources, we've done a couple, so that's definitely one way. We used to do it at the end of the semester and found that once we did it a little bit earlier, so this just went live 2 weeks ago, that we had a higher response rate than if we were doing it after professors were already logged off, students were doing finals. So doing it a little bit earlier has worked for us. I designed them in Qualtrics, which also too our university has a partnership with, but and they also have a great accessibility checker as well. So for me, that's preferable to SurveyMonkey or some of the other tools, but it also allows you to save them year to year and duplicate them, which many survey tools do. But that's also been helpful as we have some data that we want some longitudinal information for, and we can kind of keep those questions year to year, which is nice. Any
Fantastic.
other questions on the survey? I'm trying to see if I caught them all.
I think you've covered what was asked. There were a couple questions, but I think you've covered that content. I wonder if we could switch for a minute to a question that came in from Lisa. She says she's noticed that there's been an uptick of students providing documentation and requesting extended time for assignments. So she's curious if you've experienced this at Tufts, and if so, how you handled those requests.
Yeah, so I think that that's definitely a trend we have seen as well. I think what's a little bit challenging too to determine is that we have had some students that maybe they haven't been diagnosed with a disability, or maybe it's presenting in a different way where maybe they haven't experienced any difficulties around assignments. I think one thing that has been beneficial is that there has been like a university encouragement for professors to have some flexibility. We have had some instructors that provide late tokens. We have some instructors that note, 1 to 2 days extension. If needed, just email me. And some students we're finding aren't sure how to advocate for that. So it may even be built into the course. So typically I'll start out with, let's take a look at the syllabus and see. And a lot of times there is something in there too, where maybe the student is, it's for a specific assignment and maybe it isn't needed as a larger accommodation, but it is specific to what they're working on or the format of the course. We also really encourage students to utilize academic strategies to support that. I think that's a little bit different from a student that has like an acute presenting need immediately before a deadline. But backwards planning, doing a timeline breakdown and having some additional accountability, I think is really beneficial. So some of my students too, I've said, all right, let's have an accountability check-in. We'll have a 15-minute meeting on Friday and we'll see how far we've gotten on this assignment. If we know the deadline is May 1st, we can plan in advance. And I think that we have seen a lot where the routine isn't as consistent, and having some consistency is really beneficial, I think, for students. So the accountability buddies and kind of having some of those events, I think, has been beneficial as well.
Fantastic. Actually, we just got a couple more questions come in. Let me ask Moira's question first. So she's curious if you could talk a little bit more about Instagram, and she's specifically looking at the accessibility, if Instagram is accessible to screen reader users, but how welcoming is that platform for someone who's not accessing information visually?
Yeah, so what we've been doing is using alt text for Instagram. I think what we've been focusing on too is that we haven't been putting information just on our Instagram. So if it's going on Instagram for maybe some of our visual learners, maybe it's also going on Facebook so that it's on that platform. We also, I had mentioned we have Accommodate. We'll post events right to our Accommodate announcements, as well as it going out on email and as well as it going out on the university calendar. So we really try to get as much information out as possible. And for folks who, do appreciate the visual information and do want to access it that way, they're able to use that platform. I think the benefit of Instagram and Facebook for students who use it is that they already have their phone in their hand a lot of time, and then it's a little bit different of a way to share information than email. So we try to put it on as many platforms as possible so that we can reach students in as many ways as possible, but we're also exploring what the other social media connections could be too. I know we've talked about TikTok and Twitter. We haven't done that yet, but I think we're exploring others as well.
Fantastic. And so a couple things just happened. So first, I just got the 2-minute warning. So a quick notice to our audience, if you do have any questions for Kimberly about the work that's going on at Tufts, please do enter them into the chat now so that we can get them asked. Second, a thank you to Mark Greenfield, who's just shared an interesting resource on social media and accessibility. So I encourage you to check that out. That link is in the chat. And we did have a question from Maynard that I want to go ahead and address to you, Kimberly. Can you provide some examples of accommodations that the school has turned down during this time?
Yeah, I think that any accommodation we provide could be one that maybe isn't supported. It kind of all depends on where the student's impact is, the level of impact, what the functional limitations are. There were some accommodations and continue to be that are connected to health, but maybe not necessarily connected to disability. So we had some students that I had mentioned wanted specialized COVID testing. We've had questions around vaccines. So there are some things that are making their way to our office that I can understand because it's connected to health and maybe some of the students are registered, but others it's also connected to university policies and how we're navigating the pandemic as an institution. So that's kind of the first thing that comes to mind too, but I think we also have tried to to think about this from a universal design perspective. If students are, for example, saying they would like support around notes, or they're facing a barrier around supports, here's this workshop, you can go to this tomorrow night, let us know, we can talk a little bit about the registration process, but here are some supports that are available to everyone that can be accessed. So we're trying to provide as many resources to the institution as is feasible. So a student may not need to necessarily register to have access to one thing or the other.
Thank you, Kimberly. Well, I'm sad to say that I think, pardon me, we are out of time for today. But on behalf of the committee and all of our attendees, Kimberly, I just want to say thank you for your presentation today. You've really shared some thoughtful ways that you're addressing both student and faculty needs at Tufts. And I know that we all took away some interesting ideas that I'm personally looking to implement. I want to thank our attendees for coming. We are looking forward to continuing the Accessibility Conference. Don't forget, we've got 2 more days to go. Tomorrow, we have our keynote address with New York State Assembly member Joanne Simon. She's not only been a longtime advocate as a legislator for people with disabilities, but she herself is also a former teacher of the deaf, sign language interpreter, and disability civil rights attorney. So her keynote begins tomorrow at 11 a.m. You don't want to miss this. So just make sure that you rejoin the conference tomorrow using the same conference link that you've been using. Thanks again. Have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.